Okay. Hello, 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 and welcome all. We would like to welcome you to Gamma Pi Rho Lupus Sorority Incorporated's platform for this amazing webinar that we have scheduled for you today. Today, we are going to be discussing a topic that is near and dear to our hearts. Of course, is lupus nephritis because we suffer from that in many ways. And unfortunately, it's something that may be coming to people who have lupus. It's a possibility that in the end they may get it, but we want to catch things before they get to that stage. So we have a lovely young lady by the name of Mayra B. Pastore, PhD. She is a senior medical science liaison from Kyverna, and she's going to speak with us today. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about her. Mayra Pastore, PhD, serves as a senior medical science liaison at Kyverna Therapeutics, where she's a crucial role in educating and gathering feedback from physicians, patients regarding Kyverna's innovative cell therapy. Dr. Pastore earned her PhD in endocrinology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and furthered her training at UC San Francisco. Before joining Kyverna, Dr. Pastore garnered valuable expertise in supporting established biologic treatments for conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, polyarticular JIA, arthritis. She also contributed to late-stage clinical product development for I'm sorry, I cannot get that word out.
Psoriatic,
psoriasis, and psoriatic arthritis, and played a key role in the launch of a new product targeting systemic lupus. She's actually pretty brilliant. Being a part of the advocacy committee along with Patricia Dees, I had the opportunity to get to know Mayra along with some other important people from Kyverna while doing a roundtable discussion for lupus nephritis trials. So I'm very familiar with this, so I'm so excited to let you guys in on it if you haven't heard. But Kyverna develops a life-changing medicine to free patients from the siege of autoimmune disease, helping cancer patients, multiple sclerosis, and lupus patients. Navigating what's in synthetic biology, immunology, and cell engineering to create a T-cell therapy program to modulate the underlying cause of autoimmunity. Their trailblazing science meets unmet patients' needs. So, CAR T-cell therapy, chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy for autoimmune diseases. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Mayra B. Pastore.
Thank you so much, Chandra. Appreciate the introduction. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you, providing some education. And I do have a presentation that I want to share with you. I'll make sure that we have enough time at the end for questions. And like Chandra said, you can put your questions in the chat and then we can definitely discuss those later as we go through. So let me share my screen and let me know. Oh, I don't think I can share at the moment.
Let's see, let me make you
a host. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll tell you a little bit about Kyverna. So I ended up joining Kyverna just under a year ago. So it's been sort of new for me to be in this space, but I've been in the rheumatology space for about almost 5 years now, helping with different biologics that are currently in the market and some that ended up coming into the market not too long ago. And I ended up hearing about CAR T through the many conversations that I've had with physicians, and some of the early data and some of that I will share with you is really impressive as to what the researchers have actually seen. So let me share my screen and let me know if you're able to see it.
We can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Let me put it in a little bit bigger screen so we can discuss it. Okay. So what is CAR T therapy and how can it help patients in the autoimmune space? We'll talk specifically about some really key aspects of the immune system. And I'll start with this just to give you a little bit of a background of what a CAR T cell is. So a T cell, which is part of your immune system, is able to attack foreign things that come into the body. We know this because, we have studied in the immune system for some time already. So these are essentially the assassins of the immune system. We are able to use this aspect of these T cells to create this CAR T therapy, which is essentially an immunotherapy. So it essentially means that the immune system we can use it to target the cells that are actually harming your body. And this is a picture of what a CAR T will kind of look like. So we'll talk a little bit more about what this particular protein is. So this is CAR. So this is essentially where the name of the therapy comes from. So CAR stands for chimeric antigen receptor. So basically, we are able to use this protein that can be engineered and placed in the surface of T cells. And that's how at the end of the production of this particular type of T cell, this is what it more or less will look like. And why is this important? So T cells are, those assassins within your immune system. They work together with B cells, which are other type of immune cells. B cells would normally go around your body trying to survey your body, making sure that there's no bacteria or viruses around. If they come in contact with anything like that, they produce antibodies. And these are essentially the flags that they can put on those foreign, bacteria. So then the T cells can come in and kill those particular bacteria or viruses, essentially getting rid of them in your body. We know that they talk to each other. However, in a disease state, like some of the autoimmune diseases, we know that some of these B cells become kind of like the bad guys. And because we can engineer these T cells with this CAR that can recognize a protein that is on the surface of the B cells, that's how we allow the T cells to start killing these bad B cells. So in your body, you will have, in autoimmune diseases, you will have those B cells essentially helping attack your own body instead of attacking foreign things that will come into your body. So this is one way that we can target them. So how does this happen? And these are the antibodies that I was mentioning before that B cells would normally produce. In a disease such as lupus nephritis, these antibodies are actually targeted against your own body. So this is how there's damage in either the skin or the kidney or heart or lungs, because these B cells, unhealthy B cells, are the ones producing it and activating the T cells. And they produce this inflammation that I'm sure you all have experienced. So to create these CAR T cells as therapy, we have different steps that patients will need to go through, and also the production of the CAR T cells. So I'll explain this. So the first step is apheresis. This is essentially where a patient would come into a clinic. They would get the T cells isolated from the blood. So this process would normally take anywhere between 2 to 5 hours, kind of depending on the equipment available at the clinic. These T cells that are isolated are then sent out to a lab. We do have a manufacturing facility in the US where we send those cells so we can change them. So we are essentially taking the patient's own cells, adding this CAR that we just talked about, so this kind of hook-looking protein, that's how we engineer them to do what we want them to do. Once we have quite a lot of these cells, we send those back out to the hospital where the patient is ready to get the CAR T cells infused back in their body. Because we already told the T cells what it is that they need to target and kill, they're ready to do their job once they're infused back in, which takes us to the step number 4. So once they're infused, those CAR T cells start to grow and they divide. There are more of them as they are taken care of by your body inside. And then they can start targeting those B cells that are producing those autoantibodies. And then they start killing those particular B cells. T cells cannot discriminate between the ones that are bad B cells versus the healthy B cells. And so the CAR T cells would essentially kill both of those. We have seen from many different researchers that the B cells do come back. So this is something that you've seen if you ever taken rituximab, so it's depleting B cells. It is essentially the same idea, and we'll talk about why this is a little bit different. So the B cells do come back. We've seen those B cells coming back in a different way. They're not the damaged, unhealthy B cells. So we're thinking that we are helping reset your immune system so they're not attacking your own body anymore. So they're coming back and they're behaving the way that they're supposed to behave. The CAR T cell therapy does have known side effects, and most of these side effects are well understood because it has been used in the oncology space for about a decade now. So I have listed here some of those side effects, and I'll share a little bit more about what we've actually seen in the clinic. So in the patients with autoimmune diseases, they have experienced, so there are 2 major side effects that are known to happen because of the CAR T cell therapy. One of them is called cytokine release syndrome, and the other one is called immune effector cell-associated neurotoxicity syndrome. So basically, those side effects are seen normally within the first 2 weeks after the infusion of the CAR T cell. We do have, and we maintain very close monitoring of the patients whenever they get infused. I'll explain a little bit more as to what those side effects are. So if someone experiences CRS, this is short for cytokine release syndrome, essentially is where the body is responding too aggressively to the infusion of the CAR T cell therapy. So some of the mild symptoms will be fever. That's not uncommon for it to happen. Some patients experience nausea, feeling fatigue, body aches. There is a potential that the symptoms can progress to more severe. So for example, potentially, high fever or shock, or even organ failure. ICANS do affect the nervous system. And so if that side effect is seen by the patient, patients will normally experience some fatigue, some tremors, impairment in their thinking, or the loss of speech. People that have received this particular treatments are always in the care of doctors, and they are monitored very closely. Because of the long-term experience in the oncology space with this particular therapy, we know exactly how to treat those side effects, and they tend to essentially subside within just a few days of the treatment for the side effects. So we know how to deal with those. So how can cell therapy help patients with lupus nephritis? And that is a big question. We understand that CAR T for a series of 5 patients that ended up being published not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, from a group out of Germany. We know that the CAR T cell therapy was well tolerated with patients that had either lupus, systemic lupus, or lupus nephritis. In that particular cohort, they saw at least what we call grade 1 CRS, so the cytokine release syndrome, which is essentially a mild fever. That particular case studies show really nobody expressing any side effect that affected their nervous system. And the clinical remission was actually achieved by all those 4 patients. So here in the graph, on the right side, this is graphing a score system that a lot of physicians use in a clinical trial setting to understand how the disease is affecting patients. So the higher the number, the more you know that the patient is suffering from various symptoms. Here showing the number for the 5 patients in this series, and at baseline, so at the beginning of the study before they were infused, these are the numbers. So essentially letting the physicians know that the disease is active. After 3 months, they ended up evaluating the patients, and you see that most of them are essentially either at 0 or very close to 0 in their score, meaning that they ended up reaching clinical remission with no symptoms. The CAR T, like I mentioned before, they do expand within the body, and they ended up seeing that these patients recover those B cells in about 120 days after they were infused with the CAR T. The labs for those patients ended up normalizing, including the double-stranded DNA antibodies. And this is an example of the very first patient that was treated with this particular therapy from the group from Germany. The patient, for this particular patient, the B cells ended up recovering after 148 days after the CAR T infusion. What we know so far about this patient is that she is under a long-term remission. So DORIS remission, basically saying that there's no ongoing treatment that she has. She has been in remission now a little bit over 1,000 days. Her proteinuria is non-existent. Her C3 and C4 ended up normalizing as well. So just shifting gears a little bit, and I wanted to provide some information about the product that we are working with. So K1B101 is an autologous, fully human anti-CD19 CAR T therapy. So what does that mean? First of all, this particular, what we call construct, was specifically engineered at NIH. It is the same group of physicians and researchers that ended up developing the construct that is now known as Yescarta, which is used within the oncology space. And they wanted to develop it to improve the safety component of it. There are a couple of main changes that they ended up making to this particular protein, one of them being this top part here. So this is essentially the hook that we are thinking is that we know that the T cells use to hook on the B cells. So this is human, it's a human sequence. Yescarta is known to have a mouse-based sequence, which is essentially from a different species. It was tested in 20 patients with B lymphoma as a phase 1 trial by the NIH, trying to understand whether there were any differences seen between the Yescarta construct and this particular construct. And basically what they ended up seeing that the safety profile was increased by the changes that these researchers ended up making to this particular protein. The efficacy clinically was essentially the same, so that did not end up changing. Sorry, my screen just stopped a little bit. So how are we using CAR T cell therapy for lupus nephritis? So I'll go through the clinical trial, the background of the company, and then talk a little bit more about the clinical trial. So Kyverna has been around for about 5 years and is specifically and only focused in using CAR T for autoimmune diseases only. The idea was that because he had helped so many patients in oncology, why not start helping patients in the autoimmune space in rheumatology or neurology? So this is where the founders ended up observing that clinical trial from NIH using this new and improved construct. We ended up getting an exclusive license to use this construct in May of 2022. And then just a few months later, we ended up observing the proof of concept of the group from Germany that ended up providing the initial hints at, yes, using CAR T would actually be helpful in patients with lupus or lupus nephritis. They ended up publishing more information about the remission that they saw in these patients. And then we were able to clear our IND with NIH, so with the FDA here in the US. And also we ended up clearing a CTA in Germany. So we have 2 clinical trials going on at the moment, specifically for lupus nephritis. And we ended up dosing our very first patient in June of last year. So our trial is called KYSA-1. It is a phase 1. It is open label. We have multiple sites where we are doing this study, and it's for patients that have refractory lupus nephritis. So, have tried at least 2 conventional therapies, and they are not improving in their symptoms. So what happens during the clinical trial for our KYSA-1? We have the pre-screening aspect of it. This is where patients are assessed whether they're eligible. We provide them with information about the clinical trial, and then we get consent for them to participate if they are able to enroll and they're eligible. Apheresis, just as I mentioned before, this is the process where we need to isolate those T cells so we can get them ready to become T cells. And this will take anywhere between 3 to sometimes even 5 hours. And then we send those out for preparation to get them altered, actually become the CAR T that can now recognize those B cells in your own body. Before the infusion of those CAR T cells is done, prior to the patient going back to the hospital, which it normally happens about a week or so before the infusion, there is a short course of lipodepletion that happens in order to prepare your body to accept these new CAR T cells coming in. The CAR T cells are infused, and that normally takes anywhere between 15 to about 30 minutes. We do require that the patients stay in the hospital for about 10 days. This is where we know that any side effects would end up happening. And so doctors are monitoring patients. If they do see any signs of any side effects, they are quickly treated and monitored. There is a follow-up that happens for the trial. So the trial is 2 years of length. The first few visits are more frequent, and then they become a little bit more spread out as we move through the time. We are working with several leading institutions and investigators around the US. You might know some of these faculty from different institutions. So we do work with Dr. Merkel out in University of Pennsylvania. We're working very closely with Dr. Fury in New York, Dr. Robin out in Ohio State University, and also Dr. Amber Poto in Colorado. They are helping us understand and recruit patients and actually treat the patients. So just to provide you a takeaway from what I shared with you today, so there is a need for new and more innovative therapies in diseases like lupus nephritis. CAR T cells were created specifically modified from patients' own T cells, and we can change them so they can actually start killing the B cells that are misbehaving by using this hook, meaning the CD19 protein that the B cells have. The data from a small number of patients in lupus and lupus nephritis, and that are showing that there is a promise of efficacy and safety that was observed. In our product, so K1B101 is under investigation with the KYSA-1 phase 1 clinical trial for patients with lupus nephritis who are not getting better with the standard of care that they're currently receiving. We always tell anyone who is talking to us that if are interested in knowing more about what's happening, please talk to your doctors and see what is the treatment plan that will best fit to what you actually do need. And I will leave you with this. So this is, if you want to learn more about what we are doing, you can also visit us at the website listed here. So it's lupusnephritrials.com. The email address is listed there. And if you have, you know, a phone handy, you can also scan the QR code and it will take you to the website. So I'll stop here. I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll be happy to answer any questions, anything that you need more clarification, more than happy to do that.
So Mayra, I asked in the chat, this is Autumn, but I did ask in the chat. So you named a bunch of different locations and a bunch of different doctors. And the ladies that are on this call, they're spread out all around the United States. Are they able to participate in this trial if they don't live in areas that you have identified, like Colorado? Can they be flown to those places?
Yeah, so one of the things that we make sure that we understand for the clinical trial and the input that we have been receiving from patients themselves is that a barrier, you know, you might be eligible for the clinical trial, but the barrier to travel to that particular site, like I mentioned, you know, patients do need to be hospitalized for 10 days after the infusion. And they also need to stay close by the site for an additional 18 days. So we understand that that can become a barrier for, you know, any patient. And so we are working with our clinical trial sites to make sure that the financial support is there for the patients and for the caretakers that are going to have to be there with the patient after the infusion. And so, you know, we do this on a case-by-case basis, obviously. So the travel, the hospital, the stay after being released from the hospital, that's something that we can definitely, you know, have more conversations and provide more help for the patients going through this. The clinical trial, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And because I am in clinical trials, I just, you know, I'm going to ask all the questions, Mayra. One of the things is I know for like people that participate in clinical trials at my site, all the expenses are taken care of and covered by, you know, the sponsor or just covered, period. But are the, my patients are compensated for their participation in clinical trials. They get a patient stipend. Do you guys do that as well?
No, we do not do that. And the reason is because we're trying to make sure that understand how CAR T actually do work and how efficient it is for getting to potentially remission to a lot of these patients. We're hoping that you know, that safety essentially that patients might end up getting from being removed from all the background medications that essentially you need to still take when you're still needing to take the other products that are out in the market. We're trying to make sure that that balance is there. These are not inexpensive trials. There is an entire team that has to work together for a CAR T therapy, including oncologists or hem-oncologists, and also either nephrologists or rheumatologists. So it is a pretty extensive team that needs to be part of the treatment during the clinical trial. So one of the things that in it was discussed, we are trying to make sure that we are reducing any barrier, especially when it comes to the travel, and then staying close to the site. So it was going to be one or the other. Maybe during the phase 3 might change right now because we are, you know, such a small company for one, and it is on phase 1. That might end up changing in the future, but at the moment we don't provide that for patients participating.
Just was asking because, you know, there are some of us that work and some of us that don't. So the ones that work would have to take off, you know, like basically 28 days, you know, to participate in the trial. So I was just trying to figure out, you know, if that was the case, you know, how would they survive? You know what I mean? So that may just be, something. And I understand the complexity and how much goes into staying at a hospital, staying possibly at an Airbnb or a hotel close, the next 18 days. I understand the expenses that go into that. But for somebody, let's just say for somebody like me, I would essentially have to take off 28 days from work.
Yeah.
To participate in the trial.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a conversation that obviously each patient needs to think about, needs to talk to, the communities surrounding them and supporting them. It is an inconvenience for about a month, but we're hoping that, if the what we've seen so far with the efficacy that we've seen from the other patients, you're essentially hoping to get to remission, right? How long that remission might be, we don't know. So that's one of the reasons what we're doing clinical trials. But the inconvenience of about a month to the possibility of maybe not taking any more medications after that, it's a conversation that you definitely need to have with family, whether that is something that is going to fit in within your life, and thinking about the long term, right? It's not for everyone, and obviously it's a hard conversation that needs to happen with the physician, with your family, thinking about yourself.
Hi, Mayra. My name is LaShawn. I joined kind of late, so I really didn't hear the beginning. Perhaps you talked about inclusion criteria. If so, I didn't hear it. But as we know, it's different levels of kidney nephritis, kidney disease, different levels. So with this particular trial, are you more looking for people at a certain stage? More
Correct.
moderate to severe type of kidney involvement versus mild?
Yeah, so we cannot recruit anyone who's in a mild lupus
Okay.
nephritis. So it is based on the biopsy, and it has to be a class 3, class 4. So make sure class 5 is still okay. So it's essentially what we ended up landing with the FDA is someone who would benefit from this therapy, but also is able to tolerate potential side effects from it. So other aspects of your health need to be evaluated first before being eligible to enroll. The other aspect of it as the inclusion criteria is that patients have tried at least 2 conventional therapies and they're not getting better. They don't have to be biologics. Obviously, you have options with MMF, rituximab sometimes is used, other biologics, glucocorticoids, using a lot of glucocorticoids. So at least, 2 of those conventional therapies that you have tried and you're not getting better for at least 6 months. So that's potentially the patients that we're looking for. So not the patients that are, totally at the very end, that there are no more options. And that is the balance that the FDA wanted to strike, especially being a phase 1. We want to know the safety profile first.
As you just mentioned, being last option, say, more so for the oncology patients currently using this medication or this therapy rather, it's typically, I think, looked at as last resort, is it not?
For a lot of patients, it is, yes.
And can you talk a little bit to the cost? I know when you're participating in a study, everything is covered as far as that go, but I know from the oncology patients, it's a quite expensive therapy.
Yeah. So what we are seeing is that there is a lot of interest in using CAR-T in the autoimmune space. I do know that within Kyverna, so even though we are doing this particular clinical trial, we have other projects going on at the moment that will make the manufacturing shorter, that will make other aspects of what we ended up going through the isolation of the T cells, how to make the CAR T that is more efficient. And we are hoping that making it shorter and making it more efficient would reduce the price of this potential therapy once it gets to the market. We are seeing that, institutions are also thinking about how much they can put more resources in expanding outside of oncology. And so there is a push from different directions that is happening. And we're hoping that a lot of that cost would actually start being reduced by the time this particular therapy gets to the market. At least for us, we are doing as much as we can and things that we can actually change to reduce that cost. And we don't know the number, right? We just don't have, we're not there to identify specifically how much it would cost. There's just many different aspects to it to get to a particular price.
Are you speaking on that price in terms of lupus patients or autoimmune patients, or are you speaking from all aspects? Because right now it is like a definite range for oncology patients in terms of price. Yes. I don't know how accurate it is. I mean, I saw numbers like as high as 500,000 for treatment, but I don't know if that is accurate or not.
Yeah, and at least in the US, each state will cover different things, right? So we can't really generalize it broadly throughout the US just because, insurance coverage is different.
Yes.
We, as Kyverna, we are focusing in autoimmune in general. So outside of lupus nephritis, we ended up also clearing INDs for myasthenia gravis, for MS, and also in the rheumatology space, obviously lupus nephritis, but also scleroderma. And so as a company, and we're not the only companies, trying to get this particular therapy to the market, I think because there is quite a lot of enthusiasm about what the potential can be, there are push to make it more affordable. And we are hearing already from advocacy groups throughout all the spectrum of autoimmune diseases. So how can we actually have this accessible for more patients? So those are conversations that will continue to change, but we just don't know exactly how it's going to land at the end. And we have some years before we are at that point, but those conversations are already happening.
Thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it. One last question, if I may. Currently right now you're this is in phase 1?
Correct, yes.
Could you speak to the diversity of participants at all?
So we have those 3 patients already from different backgrounds. Because it's such a small group, we can't really have any analysis done on their ongoing treatment. We do have our clinical trial sites that are in different states. So in New York, Ohio, we have one in California, and just throughout the entire US. We are hoping to open more in the South. And so we are trying to make sure that whatever education that we provide, whether it is via webinars like this or materials that we send out, that they represent essentially what the patients suffering for this particular disease, what they look like. And this is kind of one of the ways that I ended up meeting Autumn and Chandra, that we ended up bringing patients into patient focus groups to understand how can we make this education more accessible. The website that I shared towards the end of my presentation, if you ever go to there, it's both in English and Spanish. So those resources are actually, you can share them with whoever you need to share them. You can download the patient flyer, and it provides essentially some of that information that I shared with you. So we're listening to the patients and seeing, okay, so who it is that most benefit. Our collaborators are working with us in trying to identify patients. And again, you know, there is a hesitation from patients, and I totally understand, because this is a more involved therapy. And so doing webinars like this, we want to make sure that we provide that information. And obviously, you know, this conversation can stop here, but you have a way to connect with us on the emails that I shared. And if you have even more questions after this webinar, I'm more than happy to provide those answers. So the diversity is up in front on what we're doing, on everything that we're doing.
And she will definitely be back because they are continuing the phases. So she will always keep us up to date with what's going on. That's why it's so very important for us to participate in these clinical trials, because no one really wants to live with lupus, and from the exciting things that they have going on. And there's only few patients, but the more that people join the clinical trials, we can find out, you know, more information about it. I myself am willing. I actually started the process, and I may be going to New York sometime this year. So I'm really excited about that. She put me in touch with a gentleman at the hospital there, and they're really focused on making sure that everything, you know, is set up right, goes right. You know, you have to go through the biopsy to make sure that you are able to continue the process to see if you qualify. But no, they do not pay you for a stipend for doing this, but they pay for everything else. So like, I'm in Atlanta now. They were paying me to go to New York and stay there, and, you know, everything that goes along with that. So I'm on disability, so I won't miss any money because I don't have it coming in. But to think that I could be involved in such a huge process that's going on, and, you know, once the medication is found to be, you know, proven to be found that this is a drug for us, how beneficial can it be? You know what I'm saying? We don't want to live with lupus, and if we could take the CAR T and, you know, do the infusion and everything, and, you know, go into remission, I'm on board with that. And I suffer with third stage renal failure, so I don't want to have to do dialysis. Any other questions?
Okay.
Did you want to show your video? Mayra has a video that she wants to show. Unfortunately, we won't be able to record it for privacy, but so I'm going to stop recording and she will play the video. If anyone doesn't have any more questions, I will stop recording. Let's see.